Hello and welcome to the Roundtable Podcast. My name is Rafi. Please subscribe to us on the Roundtable YouTube. Check out our 4 other YouTube channels, our BitChute, and obviously join the Roundtable Discord. We redo daily events, voice chats, general chats, and we have a whole crowd of amazing people here, one of whom's name is Av8rPilot, who's here to talk about being a pilot, how to become a pilot, info on flight training, each type of flight certificate, air flight capacity, capabilities, systems, emergency stuff, autopilot, functions, programming, visuals, and the do's and don'ts of flying. So without further ado, Av8r, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, thank you. How about you?
Sweet. I'm really happy to have you on. When I started doing this podcast, the first thing I said was I really want to interview a pilot because I have a lot of questions and I really want to know what it's like to fly. So that's very interesting. So would you like to start us off on what it's like to be a pilot?
What it's like to be a pilot or have be involved in aviation. First and foremost, it is probably the most expensive hobby one could have. Everything in terms of aviation, literally every aspect, is rather expensive. So basically, for folks wanting to get involved, just keep that in mind that throughout your entire course of obtaining certificates and even just generic flying, it is hard on the budget, and it definitely takes quite a bit of time as well in terms of how much information there is to learn and continuing on with retaining information and whatnot. So I guess I can start off if you want with just an overview of the different pilot licenses and
Sure.
the requirements and all that. Is that good with you?
Sure.
All right, so first, let's distinguish. Some people refer to it as a pilot's license. It is a license, but it's not referred to as a license. It's a certificate. In the United States, under the FAA, the types of pilot certificates are: you get your student pilot certificate, your private pilot certificate, your commercial pilot certificate, and your airline transport pilot certificate, which each one of those are extremely different in what you can and can't do. For individuals that can't get a FAA Class 1, 2, or 3 medical, which I'll get into in a bit, there's also the Sport Pilot Certificate, which that basically, it's a restricted certificate, but it allows you to fly under certain restrictions, and all you need for that is a driver's license. And you also have your remote pilot cert for unmanned flying and stuff like that, but they're not real pilots. Cough, cough. So basically, starting off, let's do the medicals first. So to be a pilot in the United States, you have to be able to obtain and keep a FAA medical certificate. These are not just, if you think of a physical for sports, it's almost like that, but depending on the class, it's extremely intense, per se. You've got a Class 1, 2, or 3. Your Class 3 is the most common one. That's what you, at the absolute minimal, you will need to be able to obtain to get your private pilot certificate. Your Class 3 is the generic one, which is basically just a physical checkup. They check your vision and whatnot. The FAA examiner, which, yes, the doctor doing the eval is certified by the FAA specifically to do it. Not just anybody can do it. But basically, he'll go over your stuff. So basically, with corrective lensing, you need 20/40 or better. It's the same thing with distant, near vision, anything like that. 20/40. You'll, as far as being colorblind and whatnot, there's not too many stipulations with that. So yeah, you got to be able to see and whatnot. Hearing needs to be great. And then basically, if you've got any sort of health issues as far as current like diseases or whatnot, they'll go over that, what medications you're taking, but let's keep it blunt and short. 95% of all prescription medications are strictly prohibited by the FAA. So basically, roughly any type of medicine that has that basically has a higher or a better chance of altering the mindset, you're not going to be able to have a pilot's license and be on it. For that 5% that they do allow, you'll have to basically obtain a SOTA, which on top of the medical certificate, you'll have to get that SOTA, which a SOTA is basically a demonstrated certificate, meaning while you are under the influence, so-called, with the medicine that you take, you'll have to go up with the examiner and basically demonstrate that you're able to properly fly and do everything that's needed, which it's not too bad. But other than that, yeah, there's a lot of basically limitations as far as if you've had previous health issues, like heart attacks, anything like that. There's different standards and on how long you have to wait before you can do it. But to sum it up, you got to be in good health to be a pilot. Again, the third class is basically just a slightly more intense physical. The second class is kind of basically if you want to fly commercially, but not for the airlines, like if you want to do like a small private charter operation or fly for like a small private cargo commuter, those type of pilots typically have like a second class, which that gets a little bit more intense. That they do actual audio checks and heart checks and whatnot. But the class one, that's the most common one, and that's one you have to be an airline pilot. With that one, they check everything. They check your history. At the actual exam, they check eyes, ears. They check, your blood pressure. They do an ECG. They check your brain. They check everything. And basically, depending on which medical it is, it's everywhere from 5 years to 3 years to every year that you have to get that renewed. So being able to receive your medical, say you want to get your pilot's license, get that class 3. So it's kind of confusing, but that class 3 medical certificate is what the student pilot certificate is. What a student pilot certificate is basically the ability to fly solo. Because to get your private pilot's license, which also to get your private pilot's license, depending on the type of flight operation, whether you're going 141 or 61, which basically 141 is like a flight college. That's it's an entire curriculum of training that you go through. Every lesson after that, you've got like an online study thing, and you go through everything with the instructor and whatnot. Versus 61, which is what I did, where basically you just go to the flight school and you go up with the instructor and you do what you need to do. Then you do your ground school, and that's it. There's no like schooling or anything. For that, you got to have 40 hours through 61. At least 40 hours before you can go do your check ride. Through 141, it's only 35. Under those 40 hours, and I know it may sound like a small number, but it's really not. Because on top of that minimal 40 hours is tons of what we call ground school. Ground school is basically learning everything to do with aviation, weather, phraseology, communications, how the aircraft works, the physics, everything behind it. Literally, you get your pilot's license, you should be a certified meteorologist. So going back on those hours, under the 40 hours to get your pilot's license, 20 hours of that has to be with an instructor. And with that instructor, there are, he's got certain, he basically has requirements from the FAA that he has to train you, as such as, flying the aircraft, slow flight, turn around a point, stalls, and all that stuff. But long story short, you've got, under those 20, you've got, 3 hours. It has to involve doing cross country flying, which is, over a certain distance. There's night training, blah, blah, blah. 10 hours of that 40. So you've got those 20. Now you don't have to be at 20 hours to solo. You can solo whenever the instructor feels that you're ready, as long as you have that class 3 medical, which is your student certificate. So I technically wouldn't consider the student certificate as an actual pilot license or certificate or anything. It just grants you the ability to solo. I soloed after roughly 7 hours of dual training with my instructor. Under your training, you'll need at least 10 hours of solo flying, which basically, I believe it's 5 hours are minimal, are needed for cross-country flying, which again is flying from, I forgot what the distance is off the top of my head. I think it's between the departure and the arrival, it has to be at least, 150 miles. Yeah, it's 150 miles there and back that you have to do. And then you've got, let's take a step back. So when you are ready to solo, when your instructor says, all right, you're ready to solo, you first have to the first thing you're going to do is he'll literally hop out of the plane, and then you'll basically take off, and you'll have to do 3 touch and goes. So basically, you'll take off, and you'll fly in the pattern, and then you'll do touch and go, do it again, and again, and that's it. That's going to be your first solo. You're not going to go, joy flying after that. You're literally going to do the 3 takeoffs and landings, and that's it. Afterwards, that's when he'll approve you and write in your logbook that you're cleared to do all that. Anyways, so once you have all that, you've got your 40 hours. You have to basically take and pass an FAA written exam, which the written exam is technically a computer-based exam that you can go to a facility and take. It's not that complicated or anything, but yep, you got to pass that. And then after you've got that, you'll schedule your check ride with an FAA examiner, which during the check ride, you'll start off, he'll review all your logbook information. So yeah, pilots have logbooks. Well, airline pilots, it's all electronic most of the time. But like generic pilots like me, you've got a logbook. It can be electronic or written. You always start off with a written one, but you've got to log every flight, the information and whatnot. But yeah, the examiner will review that, and then you'll have a oral exam where he will quiz you over basically the generics of flying, the aircraft, what to do in certain situations, basically different requirements to fly into certain airports, blah, blah, blah. And if you pass that, you go up and do the check ride. And that just basically involves going up. He'll basically give you a list of things to do. And as long as you do that within the certain minimums and go back, guess what? You land and you're officially a private pilot. Like right then and there, he'll go to the computer, add you to the system, and after that, you can take passengers up and have fun. As far as how much that costs, private pilot license, again, in 40 hours, ground school. So basically, you're not just paying for the flying, you got to pay for the instructor during that. And then there's also books, and there's also exam fees, blah, blah, blah. At the absolute minimal, it's probably going to cost you about $8,000 total. That's kind of about what it costs me. And then on the more average side, it's probably in the neighborhood of 11 to 12,000. A lot of factors, carry in, but basically based on where you're located and the airport you're flying at, that's gonna, tell you, or that's where the costs come down. When you rent an aircraft, for example, a Cessna 172, typically when you rent an aircraft, you rent it wet, which basically means that the fuel is included. You don't have to pay out of pocket for that. So you're going to be paying at the absolute lowest about $90 an hour, but I think the average right now in most areas is about 130 to 150 bucks an hour for that. And then you throw the instructor fee on top of that, which is anywhere from 40 to 60 bucks an hour. So it adds up real fast. But yeah, low end $8,000, average is about 11 or 12, and that's to get your private pilot license. After that is your what comes after that? So you don't have to get it, but basically it'll save your life, is what everyone tells you in aviation. It's called your instrument rating. So as a regular private pilot, yes, you can take people up and fly and whatnot, but you can't fly into any weather. You can't fly into clouds. You cannot fly instrument approaches. So basically everything you do has to be based on visual sighting. You can definitely use autopilot. You can use your instruments and all that stuff. But as far as actually flying precision and non-precision instrument approaches into airports, which I'll get into, you're not technically allowed to do that. So basically, if you take off and as you're flying around, and then as you're flying back, say the weather gets bad or the visibility gets bad, guess what? If you don't have that instrument, you can't fly into it. And if you get caught, well, I didn't have any options. I flew through. No, the FAA doesn't care. That's where proper planning comes in course. But yeah, you violate it, you're in trouble. The FAA, they're assholes. They're very strict on that. But yeah, as far as getting your instrument rating, it'll save your life. Why do I say that? Because instrument rating, it's what trains you to not rely on looking out the window. Your instrument rating trains you to literally look down at your instruments, rely on them, and trust them. The requirements. Oh, what are the requirements? I forgot the requirements off the top of my head. I believe it's 50. It's another 50 hours of training. Let me actually double check that because let's see. Okay, I'm sorry. It's to get your instrument rating, you have to have at least 50 hours of piloting command time. So basically, after you get your private pilot license at 40 hours, you need to do, well, let's take a step back because there's a difference between just regular flying, like doing touch and goes and whatnot, versus cross-country flights. Cross-country flights are 150 miles or more. Basically, you need 50 hours of that. Then you can actually do your instrument. To get your instrument, it's an additional 40 hours of training. As far as the type of training, I believe it's 10 hours of it has to be done in the actual aircraft, and the rest can be done in a simulator, like a full motion simulator. But yeah, basically your instrument rating, it'll save your ass because with that you can fly in. There aren't really any limits as to what you can fly into and what you can do.
Can I ask?
Yep.
My buddy told me, who is also a pilot, that if you've done psychedelics at any point in your life, you can't fly. Is that true?
Let's see. So again, the FAA is very strict when it comes to basically medical conditions and what you have done and haven't done. So psychedelics, you're talking like illegal drugs or illicit drugs?
Yeah, like he was saying that like mushrooms or acid, if he told his doctor that he's done those before, he wouldn't be able to fly again.
Let's see here. That's probably true. Now, you're definitely not supposed to, but some people, they don't put all the proper or all the truth information on your forms and whatnot. Which again, if it's like your class 3 medical, which is the lower end one, they don't really check your background or whatnot. It's the trust system. But for your class 1, they'll definitely check your background. If what medicines you've ever been on, conditions, if you've ever been hospitalized or whatnot. Let's see here. Illicit drug use, FAA. Crap. I just reinstalled Windows recently, and I don't have. Do you have Rafi? Do you have a Microsoft Office?
Microsoft up. He just called me by accident.
Do you have Office by chance?
Do I have Microsoft Office?
Yeah.
No, I don't think I can open it, but that's okay. If you don't know the answer, that's all right. Would you want to go? Can you hear me first off?
Yeah, I can.
Av8r?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Hello? Can anyone else hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Sorry. Would you like to go into the different types of aircrafts and their capabilities, systems, and emergency functionalities of them?
I went a little in depth on the private part. Sorry about that. I'll just wrap it up. So basically, after you're private, you can get your instrument. There's additional endorsements, and then you can get your the next certificate is your commercial pilot certificate, which that's a minimum of 250 hours. With your commercial pilot certificate, basically, again, you can be paid to fly. So as a private pilot, you are not allowed to take any money or accept any money to fly people or anything. As a commercial pilot, you can, but if you only have your commercial pilot license, then you're probably going to be limited to like really small operations and whatnot, because all the airlines and everyone, they require airline transport pilot certificate, that's the big dog. That's the top of the top. And that requires a minimal of 1,500 hours, unless you go through the university or the 141 training, which you can get a restricted one at 1,200 hours. To fly for any airlines, to do anything at all like that, it's that 1,500 hour limit. And to summarize costs from your pilot to get your commercial pilot certificate, you're probably going to be spending in the neighborhood of 35 to 40 grand in total, and then for your ATP, your airline, it's, add everything up in total, and you're going to probably be hitting six-figure, no problem at all.
Wow.
The one that
Right,
says you
so-
can fly a commercial plane. Right?
Party Poet, we'll open it up to questions in just a bit. Okay, it's still the
Oh, is
Q&A
it
format.
thing? Sorry.
All right. So what do you want me to discuss next?
So could you talk about the actual aircrafts and the mechanics inside the aircrafts? You brought up aircraft capability systems,
Yeah.
there were emergency functionalities, autopilot programming, and then visual. You wanted to talk about visual versus instrumental flying.
Okay. Yeah. Let's actually right quick. Okay. So yes, I opened this. I got this document open. Yes. If you've ever had it, substance abuse or anything like that, with the exception of alcohol or whatnot, it's pretty limiting on if the FAA is going to approve you or not. But typically that stuff's on a case by case basis.
All right.
Okay,
Wow.
aircraft types. The common terms, you've got helicopters, which are heli, and then you've got your fixed wing, which are aircraft. You've got single engine and multi-engine. As far as those go, you've got your Cessnas and Pipers and all that stuff. The performance is, this is where a lot of people get kind of confused. So basically, your average little Cessna, or your average little 4-seater, 6-seater plane, single engine, it's got a rod and piston engine, just like in a car, a little bit different, but it's got one of those. It uses avgas, and they typically make anywhere from 100 to upwards of 320 horsepower, and that's either naturally aspirated or with actual turbochargers on them. So you have those, and again, that's what your Cessnas and Searses and all that stuff have. Then you've got your turbine prop. Your turbine prop are going to be like your multi-engine prop planes or like Pilatus aircraft, which basically, if you've ever seen a plane fly over that has a prop, but it sounds like a jet, that's because turbine prop aircraft, such as King Airs, Dash 8, or De Havilland Dash 8s, whatever, they have the turbine props. That's literally a jet engine with the prop on the front. They've got a shaft converter and all that. They use jet fuel. Those make substantial more horsepower. We're talking, and there are governors on them. So, default they make, for example, a 6-seater TBM, which it's a single engine turbine prop. It can seat 6 passengers. It makes roughly, I believe it's 1,800 shaft horsepower, but it's been governed down to 850. That little thing can go up to 31,000 feet, 330 knots cruise, and only burn 60 gallons an hour. So you've got your turbine prop, and then you've got your regular jet engines. Let's see. So those are your different types of engines that are on aircraft, and also the turbine props are extremely. They're jet engines. So basically, the higher up you go, the more efficient they are versus your piston aircraft. Aircraft that are 12,500 pounds or more require 2 pilots in commercial operations. So basically, there's Cessnas, and when you're flying people around for fun, like I do, I'm the only one that has to be the rated pilot. But again, as far as there are certain private jets like little Cessna Citations and whatnot, a couple handfuls of them that are single pilot rated, but they've got to have thousands of hours and whatnot and substantial training to have that single pilot endorsement. Other than that, again, 12,500 or more, it's going to require 2 pilots, and it'll also require what's called a type rating. So for every single commercial pilot out there, they don't just get to hop in a 737 and fly it. They have to be fully trained and type rated on that aircraft. How they get that is basically you get hired by the airlines. The airlines will actually send you to a flight school or academy per se, like flight safety, for example, where you'll basically attend anywhere from 10 to 25 days of basically training for that specific aircraft, which is a combination of being in a classroom for hours on every day, as well as the actual simulator training. They don't do the training in the actual aircraft because that's just too damn expensive. But the full motion simulators that they're trained in literally have they have every single button. Everything is 100% to the real aircraft. They actually move everything. So they'll go through all that, and then you'll get your type rating, and then be allowed to fly it. You've got your pilot and command type ratings, and then you've got your generic, second officer ones. And costs for those. If you want to get a type rating, go ahead.
What's the advantage? Why is there a necessity for 2 pilots in larger planes?
Safety. So basically, how it works is in those aircraft, it's like in airliners. So you've got how the operation flow works is one aircraft is going to be the pilot flying, and one is going to be the pilot monitoring. So, for example, on a flight from Kansas City to Chicago, the pilot flying, which it can be the captain or the co-pilot, he will be the one who basically takes the aircraft off and basically, controls climbing it, cruising it, and landing it. And then after that, the next leg, they typically switch. But the pilot flying will do all the actual flying stuff and whatnot. And then the other pilot will basically, be the one talking to air traffic control, monitoring, gauges and stuff, basically assisting and checking stuff and whatnot. Keep in mind that, for example, if the first officer is the one who's the pilot flying, if the captain sees a situation where there's immediate danger, or basically if you're on approach and you suddenly get a major wind shear or something like that, the captain has the authority to take over and basically command the aircraft, basically say my airplane, versus unlike the first officer. So it's pilot flow, it's safety, and that's the reason they do that.
Can you talk more about the pilot to co-pilot, maybe to stewardess and other places hierarchy, like what the hierarchy of respect? Obviously, the captain is the highest.
So captain, it's his rules, it's his plane. Basically, obviously the airline has its policies and whatnot, but the captain has the overall authority on the aircraft. The first officer doesn't really have much. As far as the stewardess or flight attendants go, you've got your lead flight attendant, who is also who is in charge of everything behind the cockpit. So the captain is the captain has command over the stewardess, any of them at all. Again, the captain owns the plane, but as far as what goes on behind the cockpit in the cabin, that's under the authority of your lead flight attendant. And then she's the one he will be in charge of the other ones that are in there. If there is a problem in the back or whatnot, typically the lead flight attendant will contact the captain, and the captain will basically give the authority on what to do. Like if there's a disruptive passenger, if there's a situation or whatnot, everything basically will be communicated to the captain, and it'll overall be his typically authority on what actually goes on. Did that answer?
Yeah, for sure.
For sure. Okay. Yeah, those aircraft sets out.
What is the hierarchy like between the pilot teaching the person who's learning how to fly?
Oh, so the instructor and the pilot?
Yeah.
So basically, during training, basically in an aircraft, left seat is where the captain sits, right officer. So during training, you're always going to be sitting in the left seat, and the instructor is going to be in the right seat. But at any given time, the instructor can basically take over control. The instructor is always going to be technically the captain. It's always going to be his word while he's in the plane. So let me explain the situation. Well, for example, if you're just doing touch and goes and whatnot, because after you do like your few hours of here's how to do stalls and whatnot, the rest of training with the instructor is already doing touch and goes just to get yourself really familiar on how to fly the actual plane, the physics. But basically, what my instructor liked to do a lot is while we're in the pattern, as we were downwind, so basically, going the opposite direction we're landing, getting ready to turn around and land, he would like to basically pull the engine back to idle and basically say, okay, you just lost your engine, get us on the ground. So basically, although he did that, I'm the one who's responsible for getting us on the ground. So basically, I'll do whatever I feel is needed to get us there, But if he finds us in a situation that puts us in imminent danger, like if he sees something that isn't good, he has the absolute power to say, all right, my plane. And anytime he says that, your hands off. You don't touch nothing.
Wow. Yeah, that makes sense. So it seems a lot like a very a respect based.
Yes. Yes, because safety is the number one thing with aviation.
So then, is there also a large vetting process? Like an instructor wouldn't take somebody that they don't feel like is worthy of going up in the air with them?
Yeah. So, yes and no. Typically, anyone who wants to learn how to fly can go to the flight school and do it. It's typically after like the instructor has flown with the student or whatnot. If the student has demonstrated, situations where the instructor just can't fix it, like he can't help them out, or he can basically say release the student and the student can go elsewhere. But yeah, anyone is welcome initially because instructors are there to make the money, and the more students, the more money. So and again, you're not going to get into aviation unless you actually truly enjoy it. You're going to put the money for it, and typically you're in good health. So most of the people that fall under that area aren't people that are, going to try to be like, no, you're wrong, instructor. I'm doing this right. They're there to learn to make sure they do everything right and be safe. Because again, safety, I can't stress it enough how important it is. Because you're trained emergency situations continuously. You're trained on what happens if you lose an engine. What happens if your flaps don't work, your gear doesn't come down, if this happens, if that happens. If that actually does happen, if you don't have that muscle memory of training, then you're going to panic and probably end up killing yourself. So that's why continuous training and having that in memory on what to do will save your ass.
Wow. So, okay, that kind of leads into your final talking point of the do's and don'ts of flying. So would you want to go over some do's and don'ts?
Do's and don'ts. So I'm just going to pull these up based on what I can think, which is a lot. Do's and don'ts. So don't fly under the influence of drugs or alcohol or anything. There's a rule 8-hour bottle throttle. So basically, if you have alcohol, get away at least 8 hours, blah, blah. Don't piss off the FAA. Don't violate rules. So basically, don't fly lower than you should. The biggest thing, don't fly into a TFR. What a TFR is a temporary flight restriction, which is basically, think of an airport and then think of a massive circle around it that extends like 50 miles out. That basically says you cannot fly over this area or in this area between these altitudes, blah, blah, blah. I'll get to the point. A presidential TFR, which basically anytime the president's going to be flying into that area or is in the vicinity of that area, there's always going to be a TFR. So nobody gets in and out unless you're military or like medevac. I posted a link not long ago of the live ATC recording and whatnot of a pilot who was out joy flying, and he flew into a presidential TFR. What happens if you fly into a presidential TFR? If you don't get out, actually, put it this way: if you fly into it, you're done flying. You're going to get on the ground. You're going to have to do some explaining the FAA, and that's if you get out of it within a couple seconds. But other than that, if you fly into it, within a minute, maybe two, especially if you don't communicate with ATC or anything, because you don't always have to be in contact with ATC depending on the area they're in. But long story short, if they can't get a hold of you, there's going to be a NORADs, or there's going to be fighter jets on your ass in a matter of within minutes, and they will fly in excess of Mach 1 to get on your ass. Once you have them on your tail, just know that you're probably going to lose your pilot's license. But they'll escort you to the ground, and it is a big no-no. Don't violate airspace, so don't violate airspace rules. Don't. So basically, what's the rule? Basically, don't be overconfident. So basically, when you're flight planning, if you see a massive weather pattern building that's in the line of flight, and you know that your aircraft cannot safely get over or around it, or it's just way too much, don't fly. Basically, don't push yourself to go into what you're not comfortable with. So being a pilot, you always have to be 100% confident and comfortable I wouldn't say 100%, but basically you have to be fully, aware of and prepared for what's going to happen. You need to always be prepared for weather, emergencies, fuel, and whatnot. Because pilots all the time I wouldn't say all the time, but stupid pilots get themselves in situations where I can get around this weather, I can get around that. Dude, weather builds extremely fast, and especially when you're flying in clouds or any type of visible moisture. If you're at above 10,000 feet, typically you're going to be in freezing conditions. And guess what? Freezing conditions on a little Cessna or a Cirrus that doesn't have proper ice protection, ice will kill you. Ice will build on those wings in a matter of seconds. And guess what? You get enough on there, you're going to lose lift and you're going to crash and die. So don't be an overconfident pilot. Be prepared. So if you want to get your license or whatnot, go out to your local airport and do an introductory flight. Typically, most flight schools will have like an introductory flight package where basically you'll go out for, or basically the instructor will talk with you, show you the aircraft and whatnot for 10 or 20 minutes. You'll go up and fly for about an hour. You'll get to fly the aircraft and do all sorts of stuff. It's a good introductory to it all. And typically it's like $100, $150. And that'll give you the idea if it's really meant for you or whatnot. Go do that if you're interested. But if you're going to commit, just be prepared for the financial costs and as well as the time needed for studying and learning and so on. What else is there? Off the top of my head, that's kind of don't smuggle drugs. Don't be stupid. And as a private pilot, make sure you always have your certificate and your logbook and all that stuff on you, because all the time the FAA does ramp checks. So literally they'll go out to random ramps at airports. And if they see a pilot walking up to a plane to get in, they'll go up to him and basically say, all right, let me see this and that to make sure you have the proper documents and stuff, not just in the aircraft, but on you. Guess what? If you don't have that, you're getting written up. Sometimes they'll just give you some, words like, make sure next time's good. But again, most people in the FAA are assholes, and yeah, you'll get written up. And trust me, you do not want a record with the FAA, because you get pilots that have something on their record. Airlines will see. If you want to go to the airlines, that's gonna play a heavy role on that. So, the FAA doesn't give many chances, if any. But other than that, that's kind of it off the top of my head. I don't want to get this going too long, but if anyone has questions at all, throw them at me. And not just flying. If you have questions about air traffic control or anything, I can answer those
Questions?
too.
Can I go?
Yeah, sure.
For starters, you said those turbo props are fuel efficient, and they started about 60 gallons an hour. And
Party putt. We already discussed this like a few weeks ago about the jet engine thing.
The fuel hoax?
Well, you claim that the Airbus A380, for example, can't carry the amount of fuel that it actually does and whatnot, but it actually does. But you can go ahead and ask your question. Go ahead and ask your question. It's okay.
The guy is going to tell you that.
No, it's just microwaving people to make them into fucking party poppers.
Hey, Party Poet and Techno Shaman, if you either have a concise question you want to ask Aviator, you can go ahead. Otherwise, we're going to ask if anyone else has a question, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead and ask Party Poet. What were you going to ask, Party?
Well, see, there's the thing. I basically was hoping you could explain why all this tech isn't going into the rest of the world. And
let me guess, like construction and cranes.
Yeah.
Again, that's aviation is its own industry. A lot of the things developed for it is specifically, the type of and the way that it's developed. For example, the new aircraft, they're custom composite. I know carbon fiber. You hate that word. The way that they're developed is specifically for flying in an aviation environment, not for a crane environment or whatnot. So they're completely separate industries, and Boeing is aviation and all that. They're not in that. So that answers that.
Because of that, they can lift 10 times more and be 10 times lighter, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And the other thing you said was that those planes suck 60 gallons an hour, and the bigger they are, the more fuel efficient they are. Could you tell me what the more fuel efficient ones are? Like
no. The higher, so in turbine props and jet engines, the higher up you go, the more efficient they become.
Okay. So you can get numbers lower than 60 gallons an hour. Is that what you're saying?
It depends on, the aircraft type, like which engine it is. But yeah, basically the higher up you go, which every aircraft has its limitations. Most jet aircraft aren't going to be going above 45,000 at max. So basically 45,000 is where you're going to be the absolute most fuel efficient. You may not be going as fast, depending on, the wind situation or wind's aloft. Yes, the higher up you go, the more efficient a jet engine becomes.
So, Aviator, I've got another question. What was it like to land a plane for the first time out of the sky on your own without a pilot?
Homeboy. All right, so I had played flight since I was 10 years old. Man, I was very experienced with, aircraft and everything, which flight sim helped me tremendously with flight training because I already knew so much, like with communications, how things in the aircraft work or whatnot. But what flight simulation will not train you or prepare you for is the hands-on with that plane. So when we took off, I thought it would just be as easy as pulling back on the yoke, and that's it. No, you have to be, fully prepared for anything. Your feet on the rudders, consistently going left and right, keeping it aligned. You got to really pull back on that yoke to get, small little single planes up and whatnot. But my first landing, I was confident going into it, but yeah, it wasn't that pretty. Flight sim just doesn't do the justice, and basically controlling an aircraft, depending on which one it was, which I flew a Diamond. It's extremely sensitive, so the slightest, pulling back just slightly too much, guess what? You're going to overflow the aircraft, and you're going to start climbing again. Guess what? You're at that slow speed. You start climbing. If you do not correct instantly, you're going to stall, and you're going to hit that runway hard. But yeah, dude, again, that's why after you do your initial few hours of going up and learning how to, do stalls, turnaround points, all that bullcrap, the rest of that dual time with your instructor is doing touch and goes. Literally doing that, because just learning the hands-on, the physics and dynamics, that is so important, because it is, with how sensitive it is and all the different situations that can happen, such as crosswind landings, wind gusts, wind shear, flying into another aircraft's wake. You've got to be prepared and trained for all that.
Well, holy shit. Yeah, I can see why doing touch and goes would be very helpful then.
But keep in mind, for most aircraft that have autopilot and GPS, or that are instrument rated, like your smaller aircraft, like flying an instrument approach, as I mentioned, say the weather's not pretty or whatnot, or basically you want to fly an instrument approach, autopilot will literally fly the plane all the way into you. Now there's something that exists called minimums. Your minimum altitude is where basically, or the decision altitude, which is typically at anywhere from 50 feet to, several hundred feet up. That's basically the point where if you don't have the runway in sight, you have to go around. And that's also the point where you have to disconnect autopilot and hand fly it in. Now in commercial aircraft, like your big old 747s, 777s, your airliners, they're fully capable of auto land. So they can do Cat 3 approaches where basically autopilot will literally fly the plane and land the plane, literally touch it down. And pilots don't have to touch anything until after touchdown. It's incredible. Incredible technology, but...
that sounds like it. Does Drakkar, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. What was the acronym that you used for the no-fly zone?
Say that again?
What was the acronym that you used for no-fly zones, or what did you call them?
TFR.
TFR.
Temporary flight restriction.
So there's permanent flight restrictions, such as nuclear power plant. You know anything about that?
I'm sorry, what was that again?
What about permanent flight restrictions, just like above?
So there aren't too many permanent areas. The only permanent areas are typically going to be MOAs, which are military operation areas. Those are areas where, there's typically like consistent military training activity, or there's large towers or whatnot that basically you can't find them.
What about nuclear power plants?
some of them have a rule where you just have to be at a certain altitude to fly over. So basically not all TFRs you cannot fly over that area at all. For example, at a sporting event like an MLB or an NFL game, every single time there's a game at that stadium, there's going to be a TFR around the stadium. Typically, it goes from the stadium to 5 miles, a 5-mile circle, where basically you can't fly within that 5-mile circle unless you're at least 3,000 feet or higher. So there are different types of TFRs and whatnot, but as far as the actual no-fly zones like MOAs, yeah, typically, with the exception of if they're not active, so there's basically hot and not hot. If it's not hot, then you can ask ATC and get permission to actually fly through them. But if they're hot, yeah, you're not flying into them. And if you don't have permission, although they may not be hot, if you don't have permission, you'll get in trouble.
Okay. So for something like a nuclear power plant, if they had, let's just say that they had a permanent no-fly zone for a certain radius, about how far out from the plant in all directions would it normally or be a no-fly zone?
So I'm gonna have to find a plant that actually has an active one, because there's a nuclear plant just west of here that it's active, but it doesn't actually have a TFR or anything. It's only like high-end DOE environments that do have TFRs. Now for drones, there's definitely one, but typically it would be 5 miles out. So basically, if you're not at a certain altitude, then you need to be at least 5 miles north, south, east, or west when going around it.
Okay, I gave you a private message for one plant that I'm actually curious about. I don't know if you want to answer it now, but
and also for certain people, like for example, for presidents, all their houses and everything, even previous presidents, all their houses and stuff also have TFRs over it, so you can't fly, too low or within that area, as well as a lot of your major facilities like the White House, and those areas that they also have the TFRs. So,
are you familiar with military aircraft?
Yeah, you can ask. Yeah, you guys can ask military questions too.
Okay. In instances where there are around high surveillance areas, such as a nuclear power plant, there are daily UAV drones that scout the area. It's a normal thing. And at night they have these large blinking, what look like actual passenger planes, but they're not. They don't make noises or anything like that, and they fly around blinking, and they're aerial and ground surveillance. So my question is, in the event that these, do you know what I'm referring to when I talk about these UAV planes?
Yeah.
Okay. So you understand they look sort of like regular private planes, but with just a few subtle differences.
Right. So I will tell you, for like most I think it might be for all plans and for a lot of areas, or I know plans specifically, drones have to be, you can't fly a drone within 75 miles of one of them, I think. I believe the rule is. But drones have such stupid restrictions, it's not even funny. Now, as far as UAVs that are operated for surveillance, CIA, military, or whatnot, they have authority. They can do as they please.
Obviously. Well, have you ever?
Oh, I can't share. Dang it! I can't share my screen. So no, that what you sent me. Yeah, there's no TFR over that plant at all.
Yeah, there's passenger planes that cross over, but not any private aircraft that I could identify. And I've been paying attention to the airspace around here and the air traffic highways for a while. But
yeah, so basically, if there's no TFR, if there's no TFR, then the rule is that basically pilots have to fly at least 1,000 feet above, the highest obstacle in that area. When over congested areas, like if you're flying over like New York downtown or Kansas City downtown, around, you got to be 1,000 feet above the highest building. And then in other areas that aren't like downtown, like neighborhoods or whatnot, you got to be at least 500 feet above the ground or above people. You can't go within 500 feet of people. So
Okay.
so you can basically fly over that power plant probably at 500 feet.
Do you in the event that those types of UAVs were flying in unison, 3 or 4 at a time, side by side, over a particular area at the lowest altitude, could you think of a justification of why they would do such a thing?
Do you know what types they were?
I don't, but they were different than the normal surveillance UAVs.
So UAVs are used for all sorts of and various reasons. Not necessarily, for security, but I guess for surveillance they can be used, but also for like geointelligence. So basically, scanning and checking stuff. Drones are used for a lot of different reasons and whatnot. As far as you said it was at night.
No, well, I mean, 3 times in the middle of the day, and then one approaching nighttime, like just at dusk, and it was pretty dark. But yeah, flying 3 at a time, side by side, and in the area that I was in, originally the trees couldn't have been more than 50, 60 feet up in the air, and they were damn near touching the treetops. So
was it flying directly over the plant?
No.
Oh, sorry. I'm trying to put everything together.
It was 10 miles north of the power plant.
10 miles north. Okay, let me see here. 10 miles north of the plant. I'm looking at my aviation sectional here to see that area. Yeah, I mean, again, it could be for all sorts of of reasons. As far as at night, typically the only types of UAVs flying at night are either training exercises, because there's pilot recurrency that has to happen, or in training, or missions or reconnaissance or whatnot. So
okay, have you ever
okay,
heard?
10 miles.
Have you? I mean, in particular, I'm more interested in the 3, 4 at a time, side by side, and repeat sweeps.
How close were they together?
I was honestly concerned that one would actually crash into one another. That's how close they were.
And were they doing like specific patterns, or?
They would fly over my particular location, and then after a certain interval of time, fly over again, and then over again. And then I returned home, which is not even a mile away from that power plant. And then they did that again over my location.
Yeah, I mean,
And are you?
I mean, it does. Well, I'm looking at that area. There isn't anything that would. I can't find anything that would make me think that it was military related.
From one Air Force veteran that I spoke to, I did garage doors for. He said, particular that when they fly side by side and low to the ground like that they do so for a particular reason, and that those drones are likely to be carrying weapons, but that technology could not be all put onto one of those UAVs. And for example, one would be used for a radiation scan to see through.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And then the other one would have a certain weapon, and the other one would have a certain weapon.
Well, here's the thing. Anything to do with weapons is going to be in a very, very specific area, like in those MOAs. Definitely not, and there's no MOAs in that area. As far as actually, doing quality scans, what is that acronym? ALARA, as low as reasonably achieved, is a term that basically it's a term that is used within the energy industry with drones. The drones basically help do the quality scans and all that stuff to basically achieve all our goals.
Do you think of any reason why that would happen 3 times in a single spot, and then one time, and specifically at my place 10 miles south.
Yeah. Wait, when you say 3 times, like in the same night or in different nights?
Same day.
Yeah. So it could definitely be for compliance reasons. Typically, for compliance, you don't just do a single check. You've got to follow up with consistency. So having the multiple checks, that could be reasoning for that.
And the reason why it only happened once here, but on the same day, night, actually, like I said, just before or just after dusk, they did a four side by side UAV, and in fact they were even closer since the trees down here are actually not as tall as the ones where I was 10 miles north of here, flying north to south, directly over this house.
Yeah, I couldn't answer off if you had like if you knew like the types specifically of drones they were, or if they were in like actively in the air, I could potentially figure some information out.
They had two. Let's see if I can remember. I think they had one like rectangular type wing on top, and then one rectangular wing on the bottom. So it was like if you know what I'm trying to describe, it looks like wings that are attached.
Was it like a small little UAV, or was it like a Predator type drone?
They were wide. They were wide UAVs. The wings were much wider than the normal UAVs that scan around this area. They had wider wings. That's like I said, rectangular.
Do you know how many engines it had or props?
I do not.
By the way, if anybody else has any questions, feel free to chime in. Here, who is it I was talking to?
Really quick there.
Who was just talking?
That was me, but continue.
Okay, check this link I'm sending you. Is it any of those? Like a commercial airliner is going to burn 5,000 pounds of fuel an hour versus a TBM, which will burn again like 55 gallons, which goes out to like 500 or 300 or 400 pounds of fuel. So air, depends on the aircraft, depends on the engine, but yes.
So where's the
all right, Party Poet. That's okay. Party Poet.
Party Poet. Perfect. You can ask me up in general.
We can talk. We can talk more after this. We're gonna end it here. All right. Thank you so much to the live audience. Thank you so much, Av8r, for coming on. I really appreciate it.
No problem at all.
I thought this was a great episode. I learned a lot for sure. Please, to the people watching on YouTube, please subscribe, like, and join the Roundtable Discord.
And stay tuned to the next one covering cybersecurity.
Yes.
Yeah,
all right, people, we can hop back up in the Roundtable.
All right, last one to the Roundtable has to be drinks.
Av8rPilot fucks up.